Today, we're going to dive into how elite soccer players are actually feeling. And with the World Cup in full swing right now, this is perfect timing to really dive into it. And the big thing that I really want to highlight right off the bat is the fact that a lot of the strategies and a lot of the things that we're going to be discussing here may seem relatively boring. There can be a whole lot of hype, and a lot of times there's this big assumption that, man, they've got to be doing something magical to be able to go out there and do what they do. But truth be told, a lot of it is just consistency and it boils down to the fundamentals. Surprise, surprise. So we're going to dive into each and every one of those things, or at least the key ones to be focusing on. So going into kind of the marketing aspect of things, the clickbait, and all the viral media aspects of things, these are some of the concepts and the topics that you've been sold that do get a lot of that hype and a lot of attention and just provide that perception of like, okay, this is what they're doing, this is what I need to do. And so starting off at the very top is no sugar ever. That in and of itself is a very hot button topic in any areas, but especially when considering and looking at elite performance. This can go in kind of either direction though, where for average individuals, you're right, we do want to keep that overall sugar intake down. But for elite athletes and individuals who are pushing their bodies to the absolute max, sugar can be beneficial when timed and dosaged appropriately. So it's not necessarily a no sugar ever as much as it is just being mindful of when they're actually consuming it. The other one is gluten-free pasta every single time. Not every single person needs to be gluten-free. This comes to the individual aspect of things to where some people do truly feel better with removing gluten from the diet. Sometimes as well though, for individuals when they decide to go gluten-free and they're like, man, I feel better, part of that removal of gluten could also have resulted in the fact that they are now eliminating perhaps some junk food that had contained gluten within it. So it may not necessarily be directly the gluten as much as it is some other aspects of their diet that were addressed. But again, this is an individual aspect where some individuals do respond a lot better to being gluten free, but it's not an all encompassing, everybody's going to respond that way. Another one is feeling as though you need NASA designed plans. Like you've got some rocket scientist who's put this stuff together, whether it's an actual meal or some concoction of a supplement type of a thing. It doesn't need to be overly complex. Most of it isn't overly complex. And a lot of times, those protocols that get published and posted about and going viral are absolutely crazy that not many individuals are really doing. Like for the like wake up protocol, I don't want to throw names out there, but for the individual waking up at 3 a.m., dunking his face into ice cold water and things like that, you don't have to do these crazy elaborate protocols and plans to see results. And then last but not least, the supplement stacks. You don't need a laundry list or a grocery list of different supplements that you need to be taking to achieve peak performance. There are certain supplements that are beneficial, but you're not taking anything crazy. It's not a million different types of supplements. It all comes back to being strategic and intentional with what is being consumed. Eat like a pro marketing isn't as complex as it gets made out to be. It doesn't have to be that complex, nor should it be that complex. And one individual to kind of highlight this is the actual chef for Cristiano Ronaldo. Came out and said, really, he's just eating really simple things, but simple things that are prepared well in a healthy manner and done consistently. Now, whether you think Cristiano Ronaldo is the best in the world or Lionel Messi is the best in the world or whoever you put into that category, we can have that conversation later. The concept, though, is that for individuals and players performing at that caliber of a level, their diet is just consistent and it prioritizes the fundamentals. There's nothing crazy, there's nothing super shocking, but it's that consistency piece. And Cristiano Ronaldo and just his overall lifestyle aspect gets talked about a lot for his consistency in all aspects of things, nutrition included. So it comes down to doing the simple things really well, but really consistently. And that said, even the pros miss the mark at times. And a lot of times in certain areas, the vast majority are missing it. There was one study looking at the carbohydrate intake of professional soccer players during the game. Naturally, what we want to do is make sure that we are trying to keep our energy tanks as full as possible to be able to perform just as well in the 90th minute as we did in the first minute. That's not always going to be the case, but one way to be able to help that is just making sure that we are consuming some carbohydrates during the game. And so over the course of the entire match, would love to see kind of like a 30 to 60 gram of carbohydrate intake spread out between warm-ups, halftime, any stoppage of plays and things like that. 81% of the professional players studied missed that mark. We're not hitting that 30-gram mark to be able to maximize the potential of keeping their muscles well fueled, keeping their brain well fueled to perform optimally. On average, they were consuming only 17 grams of carbohydrates. So that's an area where a lot of players have room to improve. So even though it's a basic concept, sometimes the execution still is a little bit of a challenge and we just kind of come up short. So that's an area where a lot of individuals could benefit from, but it's a basic and a simple concept. It just comes down to being able to set yourself up to execute upon it. The other one was another study looking at 23 professional soccer players on are they just eating enough over the course of a full training week to optimize their body's recovery, performance, and just making sure that they're able to allow the body to adapt and respond to all the training that they're doing. And surprisingly, there were only 2 players that were hitting the optimal energy intake mark for that week of training. That is leaving a whole lot of opportunity on the bench. We want to make sure that we are fueling ourselves appropriately, optimally, to not only reap all the benefits of the hard work and the training that you're putting in, but to decrease the odds of injuries. Make sure that we're recovering optimally. This is why a lot of times when it's a very condensed schedule, like what we have in the World Cup, where there's match after match after match, you're expending a whole lot of energy. And it can be very challenging for those players to match that energy expenditure with the appropriate energy intake. This needs to be very intentional, and we need to be aware that our hunger doesn't always line up exactly with how much we need to be consuming. Because when we're training at such a high level and we're competing in such stressful games, the appetite gets suppressed a lot of times. And so what can result is unintentionally under consuming. And this study right here showcased that. So we want to be very mindful that we don't fall into the trap of not eating enough, which the vast majority of players fall into. You're going to run into more challenges and more problems by under consuming than you are over consuming. Then we dive into the supplement trap. A lot of times players feel as though the supplements are where it starts. They think, okay, what supplements do I need to be taking? Give me that grocery bag full of supplements. Let's get that locked in. Got the supplements like, okay, I have all these things. I should probably focus on my hydration. Grab me a water bottle, start drinking. Like, all right, I got all these things. I guess I can start focusing about the actual food I consume. This entire thought process is flipped upside down. We need to be prioritizing the food component of things first. That is where you are going to get the most bang for your buck, making sure you're eating the appropriate foods in the appropriate quantities and that you are hydrating appropriately. Those 2 things, most players are dehydrated and underfueled. If you address those things, you're going to set yourself up leap and bounds ahead of the average player. Then once you get those things locked in, that's when supplements are actually able to do what they're intended to do. They give you that little extra boost, but no supplement is going to be able to replace everything that you could have and should be gaining from optimally eating and optimally hydrating. So when we think about the order of priority, what should we be focusing on first? It starts with energy. Make sure first and foremost that you are just fueling your body appropriately, that you're getting enough energy in. If we don't have enough energy, the body's not going to be able to do what we're asking it to do. Every single aspect of our lives requires energy, whether it be straight up breathing, whether it be listening to this presentation and me talking right now and you're comprehending everything, whether it be playing, whether it be training, whether it be digesting. Everything takes energy. And if we are under consuming, we're not doing any of those things optimally. The body now has to try to pick and choose what it wants to do, meaning there's going to be sacrifices made. And if we are trying to optimize our body, performance wise, health wise, longevity wise, we need to ensure that the fuel is there. Because as soon as the body starts having to pick and choose what it's going to prioritize, the recovery gets delayed, the performance suffers, our cognitive function suffers, and everything just kind of slows down. So we want to make sure, first and foremost, that we are consuming enough. Then, once we're getting the quantity in, then we can start focusing a little bit more about the macro breakdown of how many carbs do I need and when? How much protein should I be consuming? When and how much fat should I be consuming? That's when we start to play with the periodization of things. Higher training days, more intense training days, more carbs type of a thing. Then, once we get that locked in, we go to focusing on some of the vitamins and minerals, the real nitpicky and nitty gritty details aspect of things, to be able to make sure that the body has all of those that it needs, because these are those small little gears and screws and wires within the body that keeps everything functioning optimally. If we are low on a certain vitamin or mineral, there's one process within the body that is now suffering. So again, to optimize the body's function for everything, we want to make sure we got the vitamins and minerals locked in. Then once we got that, then we touch on the supplements. So there's a whole lot that we want to make sure that we prioritize and focus on before the supplement conversation even comes into play. And with all this knowledge and information, it does not automatically translate into actually doing. And this was showcased with the earlier slide when we were talking about the number of pro soccer players that were not consuming the adequate or optimal amount of carbohydrates during the match itself. There was one study where they straight up tested the soccer players and were like, okay, how much do you know about nutrition? The average score was a 57. It's not to say everybody failed type of a thing, but this was a little bit more just kind of in depth and just broad asking of different concepts, different ideas and strategies pertaining to nutrition. And obviously, there's some room to improve upon. But a lot of the key concepts and the core material was understood. That being said, that understanding did not translate into automatic execution. There absolutely was a correlation that those who scored higher had a better lean body mass, but it wasn't across the board universal. And it didn't guarantee that just because they knew it, that they were executing on all of those different things. So understanding and having the awareness is step one. And that's why you're here. That's why I'm glad that you're watching this. You're getting that awareness. You're getting that understanding of what you need to be prioritizing. But then it comes down to establishing the habits, the systems, and that accountability piece to be able to do all of these things consistently to get the most out of it. Now, when we think about what elite players never do, so we talked about the things that they're focusing on. What are they never doing? They are not taking random pre-workouts. They're not walking into GNC and going for the flashiest, most brightly colored supplement because the marketing's great. They're being strategic about it. So no random pre-workouts or anything like that. They're not training fasted 99% of the time. There are some instances where fasted training can induce certain effects that may be beneficial. But if we are trying to achieve peak performance, and right now during the World Cup, every single one of those training sessions, you are not going into that fasted. You are trying to maximize your output, put your best foot forward, and make sure that you are able to execute as optimally as you know how. The other thing is they're not consuming energy drinks during trainings and during games. Energy drinks really should be off the table. To each their own. Some people are going to have different perspectives, but to me, the energy drinks, the combination of, depending on which one you're taking, the high amount of caffeine within it, the concoction of all the different ingredients contained within it, it can all result in negative effects from an overall health and safety standpoint, as well as just upsetting the stomach when you're out there. Then the next thing is in-season carb restriction. The pros are not doing this during the middle of the season. They're not going from consuming a high carb to all of a sudden randomly trying to go low carb within the season. There's absolutely a strategic way to go about your carbohydrate periodization where some carb restriction can be implemented in a efficient and effective manner. That needs to be very strategic on how it's implemented and when it's implemented. When we are in the middle of a tournament, such as the World Cup, this is not the time where any player is going to be like, I should restrict my carbohydrates right now. Not happening. Then the big thing is no new food on game day. You need to know how your body responds to what you're about to put into it. And you want to make sure that it's something you're familiar with and comfortable with. If you've never had sushi before in your life, probably shouldn't have that for the first time ever as your pre-game meal. Prioritize what you're familiar with, prioritize what you know is going to sit well, so when you go out onto the field, you don't have any surprises that pop up for you. Now, when we look at the supplement aspect of things, of what are they actually using then? Here's a list of the top 5 supplements, sports bars, sports drinks you can lump into like sports performance type things. But the number one is just a whey protein powder. This is the number one go-to post-training workout item that pretty much everybody's consuming. It's fast absorbing, it starts that repair and recovery process, and it's that additional intake that really just helps make sure that each player is hitting that total daily intake and hitting the targets that they're needing to achieve to maximize the recovery and maximize the adaptation of all the training that they just did. The next one is sports drinks. These are going to be strategically timed in place to complement the training that they're doing to make sure they're able to push their bodies as hard as they can and get the most out of that. Then creatine. Creatine is an incredibly popular one, an incredibly beneficial one. There's going to be different, again, perceptions and recommendations based on who you talk to. I fall to the category that it is incredibly beneficial and very low risk. The creatine is going to be able to really help optimize the fuel stores within the body for those high intense explosive activities. Who wouldn't want to do better in those things? So creatine is going to be a very common one. Then we've got sports bars, whether it be essentially like your energy gels and goos, as well as some protein bars that may be needed kind of back at the hotel when we're relaxing and recovering to help with the overall energy intake, help ensure we're hitting that protein target to maximize our recovery. But then also for those gels and goos and things like that, get the carbohydrates in a manner that is familiar, appealing, appetizing, and sits well for the individual player. All of those things have the appropriate value at the appropriate times. And then last but not least is caffeine. A lot of teams have actual baristas and coffee carts that come into the hotel and or before games to provide that little bit of a caffeine hit. Not only can that have a little bit of a psychological boost where it's pretty cool to have a little barista and who doesn't like a nice latte, but that caffeine component is going to be able to help decrease the fatigue sensation to optimize the output for the game and or training session at hand. So then when we look at kind of putting some things together of what does kind of the 24 hours around a game actually look like. If we've got a match coming up on Saturday, Friday night, we want to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for that game. And this is where we want to make sure that that meal is carbohydrate forward, making sure we're topping off those energy stores. We want to make sure that we have a good quality protein source, some fruits and vegetables in there to maximize the recovery. And we've got plenty of fluids to ensure that we're going to bed in a full, both hydration wise and food wise stance. So when we wake up, we are just topping off and maintaining and not trying to play catch up in any aspect. So then when it comes to the pre-match meal, this is to top off that fuel tank. Make sure that we've got everything that the body needs. In a perfect world, that pre-match meal would be 3 to 4 hours beforehand to be able to give the body optimal time to digest and process everything that was just consumed to avoid having a cinder block feeling when you step out onto the field. Then as we get closer to kickoff, about 60 to 90 minutes beforehand, sometimes that's when you're kind of just stepping off the bus, arriving to the stadium, we're going to have a snack. Another little something just to top off that energy tank to be able to still make sure that we're bridging the gap between when we had that pre-match meal and when we're taking the field. Then we get to halftime, the next strategic and time-stamped period where we're going to have opportunity to get some carbs in. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of that. A sports drink can be perfect here. This is what they are designed to do. Quick carbs in, quick carbs out of the stomach. So it's not going to sit there, as well as helps you rehydrate, get some electrolytes in. It covers a lot of areas and a lot of aspects. So sports drinks can be great there, but also getting a little bit of actual food can be wonderful as well. Just in case any hunger does start to creep in, the food itself is going to be able to decrease that hunger. It's going to provide a little satiety. So things like a banana, pretzels, granola bar, animal crackers, what have you, those can all be great options. but we want to make sure that we get a little something in at halftime. Then post match, immediately start the recovery. During the World Cup, we're going to have another game immediately, 3 days, give or take, thereafter. We need to ensure that we are starting that recovery process promptly. So post match, get some protein in, get a little bit of carbohydrates in there to replenish everything, start that repair process, and then rehydrate aggressively, especially if it's hot out and we're losing a whole lot of sweat and fluid out there during the game. We need to start that rehydration process promptly and aggressively, because the quicker that we rehydrate, the quicker the body's going to be in a state to maximize the ability to recover. And that's the name of the game. When you got quick turnarounds, the team that recovers the best is most likely going to perform the best in the next game. Then, when it comes to Saturday night after the post match, if we do have that little bit of time thereafter, depending on when kickoff was, top everything off again. When you're about to go to bed, make sure that you've been sipping on fluids throughout to try to hydrate and rehydrate as best you can before you hit the pillow. Then have a little snack before you go to bed. If this is a little bit more protein forward as well before you go to bed, that's great, because when we sleep is when the body is optimally and maximally trying to recover and repair itself. And if we provide those building blocks before our head hits the pillow, we're just setting the body up to make sure that it's got all the tools at its disposal to do what it's about to try to do. So now kind of a recap. The big 5 habits that are actually going to matter and to really focus on is, first and foremost, eat enough every single day. You need to make sure that you're consuming enough. Underfueling is one of the biggest hindrances and roadblocks from recovery to adaptation. You need to be eating enough. Then once we hit that, match your carbs to your training. The longer the training session, the more intense the training session, the more carbs that you need. If it's an off day, you can pull back on those carbohydrates, but you want to make sure that you're fueling appropriately for that. And then make sure you're hydrating before you're thirsty. Your body is not always going to tell you exactly how much you need to be drinking. If you are relying solely on thirst, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. You're going to be dehydrated. You need to stay ahead of that. So setting reminders in your phone, making sure you've got a water bottle on hand, make sure you're doing the basic things to keep yourself in a good hydrated state. Then, after every training session, and especially after every game, start that recovery process as promptly as you can. Start within 60 minutes, because this is really just going to help ensure that we're beginning to get something into the body. So, big picture, long term, make sure that we're consuming enough. This is a great opportunity to get some carbs, get some protein, get some fluid in. The body's like a sponge immediately after you just expended everything that you have. We want to take advantage of that. And the sooner we get the carbs, protein, hydration, everything in, the sooner that process is really able to begin. And it just helps ensure that we are hitting our total daily needs. And then show up for the boring work. Day in, day out. None of this is necessarily going to be flashy, but it's that consistency piece that is really going to pay off. So embrace it. Don't go chasing after kind of the new shiny thing or anything like that. Focus on the fundamentals, but focus on hitting them consistently every single time, and you will thank yourself down the road for that. Now, when it comes to some common questions around this, one of the big ones is, should young athletes take creatine? Creatine is such a hot button topic here of late. So when it comes to creatine, I am a big proponent of it for all adults, professional athletes, and things like that, due to the benefits both physically as well as cognitively. There's a lot of studies coming and showing the benefits that it has on the brain. But for youth athletes, the priority needs to be on food. Food, hydration, sleep. Start with those right there. Generally, the supplements, we don't need to worry about them until kind of we're through adolescence and we do kind of hit that lovely 18 years old aspect of things. That's not to say that it's a never or no, you can't take creatine. It's not black or white. There's going to be situations there. But in general, for young athletes, they're not ready for creatine because they haven't mastered the fundamentals yet. So ensure that the overall food intake, fluid intake, and sleep are being met before any of these conversations are even had. Is gluten really bad for performance? Yes and no. It is really bad for performance if said athlete has celiac disease. They're going to have a bad time. If they do not have celiac disease, if they do not have a gluten sensitivity, they're okay to consume gluten. Everybody responds differently. You are going to know your body best. And if you feel better going with a gluten-free pasta or anything like that, by all means, have at it. But if you're able to have regular gluten containing pasta and things like that and still feel good, that is a-okay as well. Like, it is not a guaranteed magical difference maker going gluten free. So don't add that extra stress or pressure to yourself if you find yourself in a situation where you're thinking, I want gluten free, but there isn't a gluten free option. If you don't have the sensitivity or celiac disease, you're okay. It's perfectly fine. Don't feel as though you're setting yourself up for failure. Then what if I can't eat 4 hours before games? This is going to be very true for anyone who has early morning kickoffs in games. You want to prioritize your sleep. You don't want to wake up at 4 a.m. to eat something knowing you've got a kickoff at 8 a.m. type of a thing. If we have situations where we can't eat 4 hours beforehand, if it's an early morning game, the precedent and the priority gets to be the night before, making sure that that dinner is essentially our pregame meal. Then when we wake up in any subsequent situation where it's within 4 hours, we want to decrease the overall quantity that we're consuming just because we don't have time to digest it and we don't want that cinder block feeling. And it needs to be more carb focused. The carbs are what's going to get digested quicker. So in and out of the stomach quickly. It's going to provide the energy that your muscles are about to utilize, and it's just going to feel a little bit better there. If we consume a lot of fat or fiber at that meal, that's going to slow the digestion rate and increase the odds of an upset stomach popping up. For anyone who are extremely sensitive and their gut just doesn't handle those types of things very well, liquids are going to be your best friend. Liquids over anything else are going to be able to get processed, digested very quickly while still providing the body everything that it needs. So these are the big things to kind of focus on. But yeah, so the professionals, again, they're not doing anything crazy. They're just focusing on the fundamentals, and it comes back to having the systems and everything in place to be able to do that consistently. And hopefully this is able to shed a little bit of light for you so that you can figure out what systems you need to put in place to be able to get the most out of everything that you're doing.